Thank you very much, MC, of the occasion. We just saw Mr. President after a series of meetings with the Ministers of Trade and Industry and Investment, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Minister of Finance. It's been a very busy day, but as was said, I felt I had to come to Nigeria first to say thank you. Thank you to Mr. President for his nomination and his support throughout the campaign. He signed so many letters, talked to so many heads of state to make it happen, to the Chief of Staff, who was so instrumental in making sure that I was encouraged to stick with the campaign, and also worked very hard with the various heads of state to support my nomination, with my brother and sister from Industry, Trade and Investment. Foreign Affairs Minister is not here, and with the team that I just talked about from Geneva, all of them. I couldn't have done it without this. But I want to say a special thank you to young people in Nigeria. Honestly, they sent so much encouragement. Day after day, they were on social media sending encouraging messages, doing videos, so many things I didn't even think about to encourage me with the campaign. So to the young people of Nigeria, I say thank you, and I hope that this will show you that any one of you can make it and make the country proud. I have come here to also discuss with Mr. President what the WTO can do to work with Nigeria to improve our economy and our economic situation. And we talked about a number of issues. First of all, Nigeria is a large market in and of itself, 200 million people. But we also now have the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, which makes a market of 1.3 billion people on the continent. And there's a unique opportunity for Nigeria to improve its standing in trade. Currently, we're 0.3% of world trade, 19% of Africa's trade. And in logistics, we rank 103 out of 167. But what does this say to us? It says that we have a great opportunity to improve our situation and to improve our economy through trade. And that is really important. So we talked about issues in agriculture, how we can add value to our agricultural products. As you all know, we have a transition happening in the world, going away from fossil fuels to renewables because of the issue of climate change, which is with us. And to do that, we have to start the transition ourselves. Of course, we will need our gas and our oil for the next couple of decades or so, but we also have to start moving towards renewables. We have to start moving towards more manufacturing. We have to start looking to add value to the products we now have. Why is that important? This is so that we can create more jobs and trade more. You can trade more if you produce more and add more value. Let's not export our jobs to the outside. So these were the issues we have in agriculture. I just gave Mr. President the example of shea butter and sesame seed. Nigeria is one of the largest producers in the world, and you know these are used for cosmetics. So the WTO, together with the International Trade Center, came here to work with women and men in a cooperative, Ifedapo, a cooperative in Shaki, in Oyo State, to try to improve the quality of their product. We were producing this, but we could not access the US or European market because the quality of our product was not good enough. But by working with the WTO, they were able to improve the quality of the shea butter that was being produced, for example. We get NAFDAC approval and registration, which also opened the door for them to be able to export some of these products, sell domestically to cosmetics manufacturers, but also export. 200 million metric tons. Now they have an order for 500 million more. So that's sorry, not 500 million, 500 metric tons. 200 metric tons initially they produce, now 500 metric tons more. This is the kind of thing that WTO can do. working with the ordinary man and woman in order to improve their standard of living and increase their incomes. The second area is services. Nigeria has many young people with a lot of talent. I just saw today that one of our musicians, Burna Boy, he won the Grammy Award. Our music, our movies are exported, and technology. Our young people are on the internet, creating value, fintech, financial technology. We have the investment in Flutterwave that has led to the company being valued at almost $1 billion. Our young people are doing so many things in services that can also be exported. And that is one area we need to look at. I was very heartened when the president spoke of investing in young people. Even we spoke about the Safe Schools initiative and guarding our young people to grow them, invest in them so that they can attain whatever heights they want for the future and produce and sell their services elsewhere. So that's another area we can work with these young people to access the e-commerce on the internet. That's one area where the WTO is currently negotiating rules that can underpin the world e-commerce trade, which is very important to make it a level and accessible playing field for all. We also talked about COVID and what WTO can do to improve access to vaccines, therapeutics, and diagnostics. Of course, these commodities are traded, and reducing export restrictions, encouraging manufacturing, and increasing the volume of these products. We talked about that, and first to get them to poor countries. But the fact that Nigeria can also set up manufacturing capacity for vaccines. Africa imports more than 90% of the pharmaceutical products it uses, including us. And therefore, we can do better by establishing more production here. We have the market, and we talked about that, and the need for a public-private partnership to do this, not for now, but for the future. So many areas in which WTO is working and can support Nigeria with bringing in investment, improving logistics, training our young people, giving access to capacity building for them, and therefore getting the economy to grow through trade. So I will stop it there. I can tell you we talked about the challenges before the WTO. WTO has many challenges. It has to complete multilateral negotiations on fisheries, for instance, which it's been ongoing for 20 years, and I said 20 years is enough. We must bring it to a conclusion. It has to improve its dispute settlement system. It has to update its rules for e-commerce, for women in trade, for micro, medium, and small enterprises. These are all areas the WTO needs to do more and better. And we're certainly working on all these areas. And I asked Mr. President for his support because we need to bring the world together to agree on some of these rules. So let me leave it there, and thank you very much, members of the press. Good to see you again. Thank you. Some of the economies in the world, especially the small, vulnerable, and island economies who are not able to produce products, need free trade because they import a lot of what they need. And Ambassador Chad Blackman can speak to you about, let's say, the Caribbean. What would happen to them if there were no free trade? Because these are small islands, very vulnerable. They can't grow much. So there are some economies in the world that thrive or cannot thrive without free trade. There are others, like Nigeria, that have the ability to produce and manufacture their own products. And of course, with their provisions, if you need for a period of time to be able to manufacture and produce, there are certain principles, special and differential treatment. That's what is called at the WTO, that you can draw on. This allows a developing country to have a longer time period to implement some of the WTO agreements, giving it a chance or what is called policy space to be able to develop whatever industrial manufacturing wants to develop. Of course, this is not forever, because eventually you need to open it up to competition. Otherwise, you'll be developing inefficient industries. But there is that provision that is there for the developing countries to have access to that. So I think within WTO principles, we can do that. We also have, the subsidies and countervailing measures agreement, which allows, if you feel that another country is dumping cheap products into your market, you can also draw on that to put countervailing duties to make sure that, this doesn't happen, or it comes in at a higher cost. I know we've suffered sometimes with cheaper products and copying of our textiles, which I wear, and I've seen that. So there are measures we can draw on to be able to do this. And the Minister of Trade and Industry, I think they've already been looking at some of these measures to be able to. So don't worry. Within the WTO principles, there are certain provisions that we can use to help us do what we need to do. But I just want to refer to one thing. I know what you're getting at. Free trade has lifted hundreds of millions of people out of poverty, but it has also left some people behind. So there's no doubt that there's inequality. Not everybody has been lifted off. There are poor people within rich countries, and there are poor countries in parallel with rich ones who have not benefited from trade. This is why we are very keen at the WTO to support women entrepreneurs. We have something at the International Trade Center called She Trades, which aims to support women to improve their trade and get into the value chain, regional, national, global, and regional value chains. The micro, medium, and small enterprises, Nigeria is actively participating right now in some negotiations that are ongoing to reach an agreement on how we can better support micro, medium, and small enterprises. Since our economies in Africa, many of them have informal enterprises, have very small enterprises. So if we can do that and pull these areas, these marginalized and excluded areas, we'll also be helping with inequality. And that's one of the things that is attractive to me at the WTO. Now, the next question was, given challenges, how can Nigeria leverage on the AFCTFA without being stifled? I think Nigeria is already 19% of Africa's trade is from Nigeria. It's slightly under a share of the African economy, which is about 25% to a quarter. So we should reach that and exceed it. So we're not doing so badly. I believe that Nigeria can compete within the 1.3 billion people market that we have in Africa. And if we're able to export this much into the continent, I think we're able to try more. I don't know about being stifled. Competition, after that period in which you've been able to develop your industry, which is available to us under special and differential treatment, we should be able to compete with other countries and even outcompete them in certain areas. We're doing that already, and we should build on that. We have a vast potential. For instance, there's a strong demand for our fashion on the continent, but we've not yet managed to harness it. Can you imagine what could happen if Nigeria was able to do that? So I don't know about being stifled. I think we can leverage on what we have now within the economy, the talent we have to produce more and export more. Do we have to improve our infrastructure to make us more competitive? Absolutely. We have to. But that is not for the outside world, it's for us to improve our infrastructure and logistics. You asked how will the Dangote refinery, which is the largest in the world, impact the African Continental Free Trade Area and Africa? Well, it's the largest refinery. I wish we had done it years ago. If we had done it earlier and encouraged Alhaji Dangote, who is doing a very good thing, it would have been better, because by now we would have been able to have our own oil refined here and not having to import. But we are where we are. And I think he'll be able to service other countries on the continent. I mean, his cement industry is already in 16 or more countries, so he'll be able to export. But the one thing about the refinery and so on is, even as he's doing that, and we're using it and exporting, we also have to start looking at the horizon, where many countries are now moving to electric cars. And many developed countries where cars are manufactured or not have said that from 2025, I think Norway said 2030 and on, they will no longer, they are banning any cars that use petrol. Diesel is already out. So we have to start transitioning this Nigerian economy into other areas where we'll be able to create jobs and earn our foreign exchange. And that's why I spoke at length. If we don't start, we will find ourselves at the end of a couple of decades with no way of being able to earn additional foreign exchange for some of the products we need. So as a country, we really have to go into strong reflection. We have a period of transition. How are we going to use it? So that is one of the things we face. So yes, it's great now, and we congratulate him, but we have to start thinking, how do we transition from fossil fuels? And I'm really worried about that. We need to have a game plan to get there. Now, is WTO concerned with the exchange rate regime? Yes. WTO has one of the agreements on balance of payments. And Nigeria has certainly invoked this to be able to, conserve foreign exchange. It's invoked this article. But some other members have brought a complaint against us that we shouldn't have used this article in that way. So yes, the WTO is concerned about foreign exchange, the way we manage it, the way we use it, and how we, use it to support manufacturing or import and export in our economy. I think we're in discussion with them about the complaints or about our exchange rate regime. And we'll try to explain Nigeria. I shouldn't say we, because I'm now DG WTO. And it's for Nigeria to explain, the Honorable Minister and her representative to explain to the WTO and those members complaining why we're doing this. But eventually, I think having a strong exchange rate and being able to phase out of this, I think we'll be heading in that direction. We're also going to see the governor of the central bank, and we'll undoubtedly discuss some of these issues. Now, the last question is about the intellectual property agreement, TRIPS, and the argument of some members that they want to waive the TRIPS in order to have access to medicines, vaccines, and therapeutics. Now, you know the sentiment behind this request is a very genuine one. It is a sentiment that when we had HIV/AIDS, the medicines were so expensive that people on this continent were not able to afford it till almost 10 years later, where we were able to get manufacture of generic drugs. And so many people died in the interim. The next thing was H1N1 epidemic in 2008, 2009, where rich countries bought up all the vaccines, leaving none for poor countries. And eventually, they didn't even use most of them. These things hurt. They hurt developing countries. So for that reason, they are requesting this waiver of this TRIPS agreement during this time of public health emergency so that any country can manufacture. So we really understand that. On the other side of the equation of the TRIPS agreement is the fact that it tries to preserve the incentives for the private sector and for governments to invest in research and development to produce new drugs. Some countries have invested $6 billion and more, billions and billions, and some companies to get vaccines. We got them so fast. So the other side is arguing that if we just waive intellectual property rights, what is the incentive for us to now go and develop new medicines? That's their argument. What I have urged is that we have talked about something I've called the third way, which is what people are looking at. And I said we must walk and chew gum. Right now, for vaccines, if we get a waiver of the TRIPS, we'll not be able to produce one single dose. I've been in the vaccine business now for the past 5 or 6 years as chair of Gavi, so I know a little bit about that business. You need 4 to 5 years to get a factory, a plant approved, or more, to produce vaccines because of the delicate nature. So I said, but we need them. So let's focus on trying to increase the volume of manufacturers now. For those countries in emerging markets and developing countries that have some capacity that can be turned around, there's some in Senegal. I'm actually advocating that Nigeria should start looking now at establishing the manufacture and production of vaccines for the future. This is not going to be the only pandemic. And we don't want next time to be looking around for where we are going to get. Right? So let us focus on very pragmatic approaches on increasing volume whilst we are still discussing the TRIPS. Because for the next pandemic, we now need to look at the flexibilities under the TRIPS and see whether it will be sufficient so that next time we are not arguing. Developing countries can just produce. So walk and chew gum now, and then down the line, get the agreement. That's the way I'm going. Thank you.
And we thank Femi addition.